The sun had not yet risen, but Aminata was already awake. Her baby Sarah's tiny hands were wrapped around her chest. As Aminata looked at her, she knew this happiness would not last forever. A slave mother had no rights over her child. The child was also the master's property. Aminata's hands trembled. She held her baby tighter. Sarah was only 3 months old. She did not yet know the world, did not know what chains were, did not know what tears were, but Aminata knew. She knew everything. When she stepped out of the cabin, the morning light was slowly illuminating the fields. Other slave women were also beginning to emerge with their children. No one was speaking. There was only silence. A heavy silence. The voice came suddenly, cutting through the morning air like a blade. It was Mistress Harriet's voice, the master's wife, a cold, cruel, jealous woman who despised Aminata's beauty, her youth, her baby. Aminata turned around. Behind Mistress Harriet stood 2 white men. One was older, his eyes tired and distant. The other was younger, but his gaze was hard and calculating. They were slave traders. Mistress Harriet commanded Aminata to bring the baby forward immediately. Aminata's voice caught in her throat. She begged for mercy, pleading with the mistress not to take her child. Sarah was only 3 months old. She was innocent. She needed her mother. But Mistress Harriet's response was cold and mocking. She reminded Aminata that she had no authority to make decisions. Both Aminata and the baby were property. Nothing more. They belonged to her, and she could do with them as she pleased. The younger trader stepped forward. Aminata tried to back away, clutching Sarah desperately to her chest, but the older trader grabbed her from behind. Sarah began to cry. Aminata screamed. Her cries echoed across the plantation. She begged them not to take her daughter. She shouted that Sarah was her child, her only child. But no one listened. Or perhaps they heard but did not care. The trader pulled the baby from Aminata's arms. Sarah's tiny hands reached out toward her mother, her cries piercing the morning air. Aminata collapsed to the ground, her arms outstretched, screaming her daughter's name over and over again. The younger trader carried the baby to the back of the wagon. The older trader looked at Aminata for a brief moment. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps a trace of pity, but then he turned his head away. The wagon began to move. Aminata crawled on the ground, trying to follow the wagon. Her hands scraped against the dirt. Her knees bled, but she did not care. She only wanted to see her baby one more time. Just one last time. She screamed after the wagon, telling Sarah that her mother would never forget her, that she loved her, that she would always love her. The wagon disappeared into the distance. A cloud of dust rose into the air. And then there was nothing. Only silence. Only emptiness. Aminata lay there on the ground, collapsed in the dirt. Tears streamed down her face, but she made no sound. Something inside her had broken. Perhaps her soul, perhaps her heart, perhaps both. That day, Aminata did not speak. The next day, she did not speak. Days passed, then weeks. Aminata only worked. She picked cotton, cooked meals, cleaned the big house, but she was empty inside. Her eyes were vacant. It was as if her soul had departed, leaving only her body behind. The other slaves watched her with sadness and helplessness. They had seen this before. They knew what it meant when a mother lost her child. Some women never recovered. Some went mad. Some simply faded away, becoming shadows of who they once were. Mama Ruth, the oldest woman on the plantation, tried to comfort Aminata. She brought her food, sat with her in the evenings, whispered prayers over her. But Aminata remained silent, lost in her grief. At night, Aminata lay on her thin mat, staring at the ceiling of the cabin. She remembered every detail of Sarah's face, her soft brown skin, her tiny fingers, the way she smiled when Aminata sang to her, the weight of her in her arms. Where was Sarah now? Was she crying? Was anyone holding her? Was anyone singing to her? The questions tormented Aminata every moment of every day. But there were no answers. Only the crushing weight of loss. 2 years had passed since Sarah was taken. Aminata was still on the same plantation, still enslaved, still broken, but something had begun to change inside her. The fire that had been extinguished was beginning to burn again. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep within her soul, a flame was rekindling. One night, as Aminata sat in the cabin with the other slave women, Mama Ruth approached her. Everyone loved Mama Ruth. She was wise, strong, resilient. She had survived 40 years of slavery, and her spirit had never been broken. Mama Ruth sat down beside Aminata and spoke to her gently. She told Aminata that she could still see fire in her eyes, that this was good, that hope could not exist without fire. Aminata looked at her with tired eyes. She told Mama Ruth that while she had fire, she had no strength. They had taken her baby. They had taken everything. Mama Ruth shook her head slowly. She explained that while they had taken Aminata's baby, they had not taken her soul. Her dignity was her own. Her hope was her own. And one day, perhaps one day, she would be free. Aminata asked how could she ever be free? She believed she would die here, in the fields, in chains. Mama Ruth smiled knowingly. She explained that people could be bound by chains, but the soul could never be imprisoned. Aminata might remain here physically, but in her heart she could be free. And perhaps, someday, her body would follow her spirit into freedom. That night Aminata could not sleep. Mama Ruth's words echoed in her mind. Freedom. Just a word, but so powerful that it reignited a spark of hope that had been silenced for years. The next day, as Aminata worked in the fields, she looked toward the big house. There in front of the window, Mistress Harriet sat in comfort, drinking lemonade and fanning herself. She glanced at Aminata and smiled coldly, a smile of triumph and cruelty. Aminata turned her head away. The anger inside her grew, but she did not show it. She only continued working, because she knew that anger was more powerful when it remained silent. Years passed. Aminata was now 28 years old. Her body was weary, but her spirit was stronger because she had a plan. The Underground Railroad, a secret network. People who helped slaves escape to freedom. Aminata had heard whispers about it. She had heard that some slaves had escaped and gone north, to free lands. One night, Mama Ruth approached her and told her that someone wanted to see her. Behind the cabin, in the darkness, a man stood waiting. He was black, but he was free. Aminata could tell from the way he carried himself. The man introduced himself as Samuel. He explained that he was from the Underground Railroad and that he could help her escape. Aminata's heart raced. She asked if it was truly possible. Samuel explained that the next night, a wagon would be waiting for her. But it would be dangerous. If she were caught, they would kill her. Aminata did not hesitate. She agreed immediately. Samuel nodded and informed her that she would not be alone. Mama Ruth and 2 other women would also be coming. He told her to be ready. The next night, the moon was dark. Aminata and the others quietly slipped out of the cabin. Their hearts pounded wildly. They walked barefoot so their footsteps would not be heard. When they entered the forest, Samuel was waiting for them. The wagon was there, small, old, but it was a wagon leading to freedom. Samuel urged them to hurry and climb aboard. They all climbed into the wagon. Samuel whipped the horses. The wagon moved quickly. Aminata looked back. The plantation was disappearing into the darkness. Her heart was both excited and afraid. But she knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. Aminata was free. But freedom was not what she had expected. When they arrived in Pennsylvania, Aminata and the others settled in a small community. Free black people lived here. But life was still hard. Finding work was difficult. Finding food was difficult. Staying safe was difficult. Every day, Aminata thought about Sarah. Where was she? Was she still alive? Did she remember her mother? Mama Ruth told her that while she was free, her heart was still in chains, that she needed to let Sarah go. But Aminata could not. Every night she dreamed of Sarah. Her tiny hands, her smile, her cries. Every morning she woke up in tears. One day, in church, a preacher was speaking. He said that sometimes the things we lose define us. but they should not destroy us. They should make us stronger. When Aminata heard those words, something changed inside her. Perhaps she would never find Sarah. Perhaps she would never see her again, but she could live for her. She could honor her memory. And that was when Aminata found a new purpose: to help other enslaved women, to teach them to read and write, to give them hope. She began working with the church, organizing secret meetings where newly freed women could learn skills and find support. Aminata shared her story, not with bitterness, but with strength. She told them that loss did not have to mean defeat, that their children, whether stolen or free, deserved mothers who fought for a better world. Years passed. Aminata became a respected figure in the community. She married a kind man named Daniel, a blacksmith, who had also escaped slavery. They built a small house together. They had no children of their own, but Aminata poured her love into the dozens of women and children she helped. One cold winter morning in 1870, 18 years after Sarah was taken, a young woman knocked on Aminata's door. She looked to be about 20 years old. Her skin was the same rich brown as Aminata's. Her eyes held a familiar sadness. When Aminata opened the door, the young woman stood there trembling. She explained that she had been searching for someone. Her mother, a woman who had been enslaved in Georgia. A woman named Aminata. Aminata's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake. She asked the young woman what her name was. The young woman's voice was barely a whisper. She said her name was Sarah, that she had been sold as a baby, but had never forgotten her mother's face, that she had spent years searching, asking questions, following rumors, that an old trader, on his deathbed, had finally told her where to find the woman who had screamed her name as the wagon pulled away. Aminata collapsed to her knees. She pulled Sarah into her arms and held her as if she would never let go. Both women wept. Years of pain, years of longing, years of unanswered questions poured out in that embrace. Sarah explained that she had been sold to a family in Virginia. They had been cruel at first, but as she grew older, the master's elderly mother had taken pity on her and taught her to read. When the woman died, she had left a small sum of money to Sarah in her will. With that money, and with the help of abolitionists, Sarah had bought her freedom and begun searching for her mother. Aminata held her daughter's face in her hands. She memorized every feature, every line, every expression. She told Sarah that not a single day had passed when she had not thought of her, that every breath she had taken had been for her, that she had never stopped being her mother, even when they were apart. Sarah wept and said she had felt the same, that somehow deep in her heart she had always known her mother was searching for her too. From that day forward, Aminata and Sarah were inseparable. They built a life together. Sarah married a carpenter, and they gave Aminata 3 grandchildren. Aminata spent her final years surrounded by love, surrounded by family, surrounded by the freedom she had fought so hard to claim. When Aminata passed away in 1889, she was 70 years old. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Sarah stood at the front, holding her own daughter's hand, and spoke about her mother's strength, about her refusal to be broken, about her unwavering hope. She said that Aminata had taught her that love could survive even the cruelest separations, that hope could grow even in the darkest soil. But the story does not end there, because Aminata's legacy lived on through Sarah, through her grandchildren, and through every generation that followed. In present-day America, a young woman named Maya stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her janitorial uniform. She was 26 years old, an immigrant from Ghana. She had come to America 3 years ago, full of hope and dreams. She had imagined opportunity, education, and a better life. But reality had been harsh. Maya worked as a cleaner in a large corporate office building in Atlanta. The pay was low, the hours were long, and the treatment was often humiliating. Her supervisors spoke to her as if she were invisible. Her co-workers ignored her. Customers sometimes made racist remarks, calling her names or mocking her accent. Every day, Maya scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, and cleaned bathrooms that others would never notice. She did this work with dignity, even though the world treated her as if she were worthless. She sent most of her earnings back to her mother and younger siblings in Ghana. She lived in a small, cramped apartment with 3 other immigrant women. She ate cheap food and wore second-hand clothes. But Maya refused to give up. Just like her ancestor Aminata, she carried a fire inside her. A fire that whispered that she was more than what the world saw, that she deserved more, that she could achieve more. Maya had enrolled in night classes at a community college. She was studying business administration. Every night, after working 10-hour shifts, she sat at a tiny desk in her shared bedroom and studied by lamplight. Her roommates thought she was foolish. They told her that immigrants like them would never get ahead, that the system was rigged against them, that she was wasting her time and money. But Maya did not listen. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her, stories of ancestors who had survived unimaginable horrors, who had been stolen, enslaved, and broken, but who had refused to stay broken. One evening, as Maya was cleaning the executive floor of the office building, she overheard a conversation. 2 corporate executives were discussing a new diversity initiative. The company wanted to hire someone to lead their community outreach program, someone who understood the struggles of marginalized communities, someone authentic. Maya's heart raced. This was the kind of opportunity she had been dreaming of, but she knew they would never consider her. She was just a cleaner. She had no degree yet. She had no connections. But then she remembered Aminata. She remembered Sarah. She remembered the strength that ran through her blood. The next morning, Maya did something bold. She wrote a letter to the CEO of the company. She explained who she was, where she came from, and why she was the perfect person for the position. She described her lived experience, her education, and her vision for the program. She dropped the letter off at the executive assistant's desk and walked away, her hands shaking but her head held high. 2 weeks passed. Maya heard nothing. She began to think she had made a mistake, that she had embarrassed herself, that she should have stayed in her place. But then one afternoon, as she was mopping the hallway, the executive assistant approached her. She handed Maya a business card and told her that the CEO wanted to meet with her. Maya could barely breathe. She scheduled the meeting for her day off. She borrowed a professional outfit from one of her roommates. She practiced what she would say over and over again. When the day came, she walked into that office with her head high and her voice steady. The CEO, a middle-aged white woman named Rebecca, sat across from her. She asked Maya about her background, her experiences, and her vision. Maya spoke from the heart. She talked about the immigrant women she lived with, about the systemic barriers they faced, about the resilience and strength of marginalized communities, about her own journey and her determination to create opportunities for others. Rebecca listened intently. When Maya finished, there was a long silence. Then Rebecca smiled and extended her hand. She told Maya that she was exactly what the company needed, that her authenticity, her perspective, and her passion were invaluable. She offered Maya the position on the spot. Maya accepted, tears streaming down her face. Within months, she had transformed the company's community outreach program. She created partnerships with immigrant organizations, established mentorship programs, and advocated for policy changes within the company. Her work was recognized nationally. She was invited to speak at conferences. She became a voice for the voiceless. Years later, Maya stood on a stage, receiving an award for her contributions to social justice. As she looked out at the audience, she thought about Aminata, about Sarah, about all the women who had come before her, who had suffered and fought so that she could stand here today. She thought about the chains they had worn and the chains she had broken. Maya spoke into the microphone. She said that her success was not hers alone, that it belonged to every ancestor who had refused to be broken, every mother who had lost a child and still found the strength to hope, every woman who had been told she was nothing and still believed she was something. She said that the fight for justice was not over, that racism, inequality, and oppression still existed, but that every generation had a responsibility to push forward, to break more chains, to create more opportunities, to build a world where no mother would ever have to watch her child be taken away, where no person would be judged by the color of their skin, where everyone could live with dignity, freedom, and hope. As Maya finished speaking, the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. And somewhere, in the space between past and present, Aminata smiled, because the fire she had carried had never gone out. It had been passed down through generations, burning brighter with each one, and it would continue to burn, lighting the way for all those who came after. The story of Aminata and Maya reminds us that history is not just about the past. It lives in us, it shapes us, and it calls us to action. The chains of slavery may be gone, but the chains of injustice remain, and it is up to each of us to break them, one link at a time until every person can truly be free.